So today I wanted to share with you the yarn winder that I have and how much easier your life can be if you have one. If you're a knitter, crocheter, loom knitter, whatever your craft, there are multiple reasons that yarn winders are necessary a lot of times, but will make your life a lot easier. I have the Stanwood 10 ounce, meaning it will roll a very large cake of yarn. And it's $51.95 at the Stanwood Imports website. That's not in a lot of people's budgets. You don't have to get this one. You can get a smaller one that doesn't wind as large of a skein of yarn for about 14 bucks. So they're really affordable. This is a particularly higher end one, but I really enjoy it. I wanted to preface this by saying there's a lady on YouTube that shows you how to put a paper towel or toilet paper roll on one of these mixer handles and spins it. Please do not do that. You will end up with nothing but a huge tangled mess of yarn. And I know this because I have tried it. So that does not work at all. So if you're going to wind yarn, either do it by hand or find a yarn winder that you like. Okay, so what does this thing do? This is a giant skein of Bernat blanket, which is, you can see, I forget how many yards this one is. It's 10.5 ounces. Okay, 10.5 ounces. And it rolls it into this nice little, I wrapped these. It doesn't usually look like this, but the bottom part came unwrapped, and so I rewrapped it because I didn't tighten it up. But you basically take this, and look what a nice, neat cake of yarn you end up with after you wind it. Additionally, not only is it nice, the main reason that I like it is a lot of yarn, acrylic yarn. This is a good example. Red Heart Strata. See, this is a really small skein of yarn. This is 3.5 ounces of yarn. So in the first place, it's not a very large skein of yarn, so you don't want to lose a lot of it. What happens when you start to use acrylic yarn, you find that somewhere along the line, for whatever reason, there is a cut and it has been retied. So for instance, this is a skein of the same yarn in a different color. I started winding it and I got this much of it. This is actually wound by hand. But I got to about this many yards, which is not much, and it had been cut and tied. So basically now I have this tiny bit of yarn, which is like scrap yarn, that's not terribly useful, or a really small ball of yarn. You'll find that will happen a lot when you start winding your yarn. You'll find a place that will be cut. Another reason to wind your yarn is, for instance, this is Hometown USA. And you see how it's really loosely wound in the first place, and you're trying to find your center pull. And when you're trying to find your center pull, you can end up pulling out the entire middle section. See, I can't even find the center pull, and that ends up being a big mess. So if I can't find the center pull, I usually start winding it from the outside. Okay, so for instance, this is Red Heart, so a lot of times you'll have this nice little center pull tail, which is helpful until you use a little bit of the skein, and then the skein gets really loose and starts to come unwound. On this one, see, there's no little center pull on this one. So once again, I would end up pulling this entire middle section out, or I would have to start from this outside strand, which is what I usually do just to save the yarn getting tangled. That will end up, if you wind a Red Heart, you'll end up with this nice little cake. It's also, to me, a lot easier to store a nice little cake of yarn than these big, humongous skeins like this. So that's my main reason for using a yarn winder. If you would like to see a small demonstration of how this particular one works, I'll be happy to show you. It's really easy. You thread it through this one, this little loop right here. Hopefully I'm still in camera frame because I can't watch what I'm doing. And then thread it through this one, Okay, then I'm going to put the top of it right here, secure it down, and from here on out, I need to make sure I don't catch this tail. Oops. Sorry, I'm not good at untangled. Okay, so from here on out, I'm going to wind it, and I usually keep some tension on it so that it'll wind a little bit better. So that's all I do. I just start to wind it. And you continue to wind it until you get to the end. Take this, pull it off. It's not really handy for really tiny yardages of yarn, but it's still helpful and it's still easier. You still have a center pull. So what happens is you pull from the center, seeing your yarn never gets tangled. So this is the Stanwood 10 ounce. Like I said, this will do a very large skein of yarn winder. You can find a smaller one. I'll put a link to this particular one in the description. They also make a smaller yarn winder that's a little bit less expensive. So that is how a yarn winder makes your life easier.